Okay, I wanted to talk for a moment about the commandment that is the most unusual of all the commandments. And what commandment is that? When you talk about the unusual commandments, of course, we refer to the commandment that's the most unusual, which is the commandment of thou shalt not covet, otachmod, because the last five commandments begin with the prohibition of deeds. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal. Then it's a commandment to prohibit words. You shall not bear false witness. And then in the last commandment, it is you shall not covet, which is a prohibition of thought and feeling. So how do we go from a commandment of deeds and action, words, to a commandment of thought? Very, very, very different type of commandment. The classic answer of the Ibn Ezra, which is that the only reason why it's there is because you're thinking about it. You don't covet. You only covet what's closest to you. The peasant farmer doesn't covet the prince's wife. He only covets his neighbor's wife. But fundamentally, the question is, how come this is in the Ten Commandments? And it's very unusual. So first of all, that's the uniqueness of the Ten Commandments. The uniqueness of the Ten Commandments, as opposed to, like, let's say, the Constitution of America, which is focused on actions. But the uniqueness of the Ten Commandments is that it's also not just limited to actions, but it's extended to values, extended to beliefs and thoughts. And that's something very important. So how do we deal with this question of thou shalt not covet? So first of all, I want to recommend a beautiful essay from Nechama Leibowitz. And Nechama Leibowitz distinguishes that there are multiple approaches amongst the commentaries, as she so brilliantly often shows. And her approach is to say that it refers to actions as a result of your coveting. That's the first approach of the Rambam. She says, refers to actions as a result of the coveting. So, for example, he says, the Rambam writes in his book of commandments as follows. I'll read it. His mitzvah number 365. We are, negative commandment number 365. We are warned not to engage in any plot to buy out our brother in accordance with the verse, you shall not covet thy neighbor's house. Meaning to say, the Rambam extends it from not coveting to saying, don't engage in a plot to buy out the house. He extends it from simple coveting to an action resulting from the coveting. Should you imagine it that only coveting by word is meant? Don't think that it's just having this desire. That's not enough. Because the text says, you shall not covet silver and gold upon them and take. Meaning to say that it refers to more than just coveting. It refers to taking as a result of it. And the Rambam writes explicitly that the prohibition refers to a plot to take over what we desire. You're not just desiring the other person's house, you're desiring to take it over. So that's what the Rambam is saying. And he continues, therefore, once you let yourself covet in your mind a desirable object that you have seen in your friend's house, you've violated the prohibition of do not desire. So if you just want what they have, that's do not desire. But when you take the steps to acquire it, then you're doing what's called do not covet. So the Rambam is saying that do not covet refers to taking steps to take the object of what you want, as opposed to the second way it's formulated in the Ten Commandments, which says "L'titaveh," that's just desiring. But not everybody agrees with the Rambam. The Malbim, Rabbi Ben Mintz, whose house we're in, He used to love the Malbim. I could see his eyes sparkle every time he quoted the Malbim. So he writes as follows. He says that the desire refers to a physical experience, the actual impact of something that is pleasant to the eye. That's what he's referring to, a physical experience. And the stimulation of desire by visual contact. So it refers to something that our eyes grow, let's say our eyes grow big. You ever hear something that, so that's what the Malbim is saying. And then a third approach that Nechama Leibowitz cites, he cites many, I just want to share this third approach he cites, is from the Ktav Kabbalah Mecklenburg, and he points to the reason why you are coveting. The fact that you're coveting shows a complete defect in your body, because if I guarantee you this, I'll just say it outright and then we can read a little bit for what he says. I guarantee you that if you're actually studying Torah all day, you won't be coveting your neighbor's house or your neighbor's car, because you won't have time for that. You filled your heart with other things. And if you're filling your heart with the right things, you won't have space in your mind and your heart for coveting the wrong things, because you just won't have time. You're just focused on the right things. So it shows that your heart has been empty and your heart has space. The only reason why you're going to start coveting or desiring is because you're not filling your time with the proper things. This is what the Ktav Kabbalah writes. He says, why does the Torah say that you have to love Hashem, your God, with all your heart, b'kol levavcha, with all your heart and with all your soul? Wouldn't it have been sufficient to write simply, love Hashem? You shall love Hashem, but why does it with your heart? Why did it say with all your heart? So what does it mean? What do we get by adding in the word all? So we get by adding in the word all, the idea is that your heart should be completely full of love with God, and that there should be no room for both love of God and love of the world, because the moment you haven't filled it with the love of God, all of a sudden we're starting to filling it with other things like coveting. And so that's what Nechama Leibowitz cites from Rabbi Mecklenburg. I just want to pause the recording here for a moment.